Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for standing by. Welcome to the Colorado Legacy Foundation Healthy School Champions Scorecard Webinar, Part 2. During the presentation, all participants will be in a listen-only mode. If you would like to ask a question during the presentation, please use the chat feature located in the lower left corner of your screen. If you need to reach an operator, you can press *0. As a reminder, this conference is being recorded Tuesday, December 11th, 2012. I would now like to turn the conference over to Mary Doyen. Please go ahead.
Well, hi everybody, and welcome again to the Healthy School Champions Scorecard webinar. I'm Mary Doyen, and with me is
Donna Duffy,
and also Katie Fleming, who will be speaking to you toward the end of our webinar today. Donna has fortunately done one of these before. This is my first time on this end of a webinar, and so we've gone through lots of, we've been coached a lot, but bear with us. We're going to do our best to try to make this helpful and informative for you. Just to give you a little bit of background, Donna and I have been involved with the webinar since the very beginning. With the scorecard since the very beginning. See, I'm already just trying to catch up. We conducted interviews with all of the finalists, both in the 2010 and 2012 version. There really wasn't one in 2011 just because of the calendar year. But this webinar really is based on what we heard when speaking with these finalists. It's not really an evaluation study. We don't want to suggest that it is. But it is based on information that we collected from the finalists by perusing all of those interviews, by looking at success stories and all of the things that people turned in over the course of applying for these awards over the last couple of years. So this is the second, as Grant said, of the webinars. The first one happened in November, and Grace Lynn and Katie Fleming did that webinar, which was really to kind of help you understand what changes have been made to the scorecard, how it looks different now, and we've made some really nice modifications, I think, based on what we've learned. And if you would like to see that webinar, it's archived in the healthyschoolchampions.org website, and just click on the scorecard link, the middle box, and then click on Watch a Scorecard Webinar, and you can see that webinar. Ours will be placed there after today's webinar is over, so you'll have both of those to look at if you'd like. Another place that you might want to go for information is the Colorado Legacy Foundation, and you'll see again that this website is colegacy.org, and there you can find lots of resources, and most specifically one that might be useful to you is the best practices worksheets or handouts. Those are located there, and they list the best practices in all of the areas of coordinated school health that the Legacy has information about. And if you go there, you might be very handy, I think, as you're applying for the next round of awards. So that, again, is more on that website. Okay, so I think we're really ready to begin to talk about what we have in store for you today. But the first thing we want to say is thank you to lots of people. This whole project is funded by the Health Foundation, the Colorado Health Foundation. Obviously, the Legacy Foundation is very involved, as is CDE, CDPHE, RMC Health, and obviously all of you out there, Healthy School Champions. Many of you are on the phone who have been awarded a Healthy School Champion Award, so we thank you very much for your participation, and we look forward to lots of new schools applying in this coming year. Okay, so we're going to do our first, what they call poll. You can call it a survey, call it a poll, whatever. But all of you, I think, have this up on your screen now. And the question is, has your school ever completed the Healthy School Champion Scorecard? So we thought it might be nice to get a sense of who's out there today. And so please, if you would, take a second and click on the response that best represents you. And as that starts to happen, we'll be able to see those results appear on the screen. So go ahead and take a few seconds to do that. We can see the results coming in now. And it looks like most of you are first-timers. But we do have about 8% so far who started but didn't finish, and then 25% of the people who've completed the scorecard in years past. So that's a sense of who's on the call today. I hope everybody's had a chance to answer that. It looks like we have a question from someone. It looks like that people are not seeing the results. We do want the participants to see those, but we have it on another screen, so hopefully if you answered that question, that's right, you'll see it. That's another thing to remind you of. If you don't answer the question, you probably won't see the results. We know you won't see the results. So if you want to see how you fit in with everybody else's response, it's a good idea for you to actually answer the questions. Okay, I think we'll move on. So the objectives for today are to review the characteristics of past champions, to suggest ways that your school could be strategic in becoming a champion, and to answer questions related to the scorecard tool and progress and completion. And even though Donna and I are not like champions at the chat business yet, we're learning. As you have questions that we don't answer, or that we say something that makes you think of a question, please go ahead and use your chat box and ask the question, and we will try to either answer them back in a chat or with the whole group, depending on what the question might be. So the agenda for today is really to review these 5 characteristics. And again, this is basically the results of what Donna and I found as we interviewed all the finalists over the last 2 times or 2 years that this has been done, looking at the all of the information that everyone sent in. And this is kind of what we think we heard, and we try to put this into 5 categories about what makes a healthy school champion. So you can see that the 5 characteristics are around culture, around building effective teams, on using data to make decisions, on how schools used best practices, and about unique partnerships. So we're going to talk about those now one by one. And then at the end, we'll again go over dates, deadlines, and details. So let's talk a little bit about culture. We found that in the area of culture, there were really 4 big things that stood out, 4 areas about culture that were important. This concept of the whole child and thinking about the whole child and having a philosophy that really engages students in thinking about the whole child. This can-do culture that many of these champions have, how they were role models not just for their school but for others in their district, and the real importance of principal leadership. So the first one that we're going to talk about is this whole child. Probably as much as anything else, except for perhaps principal leadership, which we'll talk about in a minute, we found that the schools that were the big award winners, in almost every case, they would talk about health being the foundation for academic success. They said things like, we want our students to be healthy, safe, engaged, and challenged. That in order for students to learn, they had to be healthy. And so that was the premise on which they really built their foundation. And I think we saw that in almost every one of the schools that have been the big award winners. The second thing that we heard from these schools is that in our school, we have a culture of respect. One of the quotes from a student in one of the schools said, "People say that kids in our school are really respectful of each other. So this culture of respect and this fact that health is the foundation for academic success is really important. The wellness culture is pervasive in the school. It's talked about as much as reading and math. The second part of this culture characteristic is this can-do attitude. Champions seem to change over time, and Donna's going to talk about that in a few minutes when she talks about the team. But what we saw in these schools is that even though you may have started with a healthy school champion, someone who had a great deal of passion, then in these award-winning schools, that person might change. Everyone gets into the act. When there's a void because someone leaves the school or something happens, somebody just steps up, and that's because there's so many people involved. And the other thing we heard a lot about is this area of sustainability. And I think all of you know that when you write for grants or apply for grants, one of the questions is always about sustainability. And a couple quotes that were, I think, really telling to us about these schools that are award winners, when they talked about sustainability, they said things like, "We carry on regardless of money, circumstances." Another quote, when school health is owned by an ever-increasing circle of people, programs are more likely to be sustained. So those are the kinds of things that we heard from folks all the time. We heard things like, it doesn't really matter if something would be cut or if this grant didn't happen, we would find a way because we know how to get more funds in our school because it's so important and there's so many people involved that we know this will carry on. The next slide kind of says it all. So take a second and read that. Wouldn't it be great to be in a school that when you went to some kind of an accountability meeting or something like that, that the only question they ask you is, will you still be able to maintain your health and wellness focus? So again, that talks about this culture of a can-do, of we're going to get it done. The third part of this piece on culture is about role models. And a couple things worth mentioning here is that the people in the schools that were award winners, those team members see themselves as leaders in the district, not just in their school. They seem to set the tone for what happens in other schools. And it's interesting, we heard this, I think, 3 or 4 times this last round, when schools would say, we are now the pilots for any new innovation that the district wants because we have this kind of attitude that we can get it done. So they see themselves again as role models. So before we talk about the last feature of this, I want to ask you another question, which is about principal leadership. So you can see this poll up on your screen right now, and on a scale of 1 to 5, we'd like for you to rate your principal's degree of leadership in school health. So take a second. Remember, it's about school health. Take a second and fill that in. We can see the answers coming in. We're going to wait about 5 more seconds and then we'll talk about the results. So if you haven't answered, please put your dot in one of those areas. Well, based on the poll, and again, if you didn't answer the question, you won't be able to see the results, but I think most of you did. You see your principal as being someone who would lead or co-lead the team. Here is great news, folks. I think of all of the things that we heard from the champions, perhaps principal leadership stands out as the most important. So I'm going to close this poll and let's talk about that now. In the area of principal leadership, we spoke Donna and I spoke to, in this past round, we spoke to finalists, as we said, in all of the schools, except for one school where the principal was not able to be there that day. The principal served as a major spokesperson in the interview that we did with a finalist. More than anywhere else, it was from the principal that we heard about this culture of respect, that we heard about this philosophy that without kids being healthy, they couldn't be academically successful. So this whole concept of principal leadership is really, really important. It's also supported in the literature. You can see this quote on your screen right now from Skip Valois and his co-workers in South Carolina. They did a study about principal leadership and its effect on school health programs, and it appears in an ASCD Journal article, and which is also on the Legacy or the Healthy School Colorado website. But this quote is, I think, really, really telling. It's not sufficient for a principal to merely give permission for the school staff to carry out health initiatives, which is, by the way, what we heard in some of the schools that are just getting started. The principal must lead or co-lead the effort for it to be systemic and sustainable. So that's what you're striving for. That's a big piece, I think, of being able to be in a school that really is one that is at this championship status.
Okay, this is Donna. I get to talk to you about effective teams, which is the second characteristic that we found in the Healthy School Champions. But before we start, I'm going to give you another survey. So, take a minute and tell us how many years has your school had an active school health team. And remember, as soon as you choose an answer, you'll be able to see the results pop up. They're coming in fast and furious. Keep answering. We're going to give you a couple more seconds. While you're answering, I just want to remind you that it takes a team effort to maintain and grow healthy school programs and initiatives. And whether your team has been around for 1 year or 10 years, it is the driving force in school health. And schools that don't have a school team are at a real disadvantage. So, as you can see from the results, over half of you who are on the phone today have a team that has been in place for about 2 to 4 years, which is fabulous. And some of you have teams that have been here not that long, and a few have been here longer. So let's move forward and talk about school teams. There's several things I want to talk about when we think about teams. Mary began talking about the champion, but let's talk about that a little bit more. In most cases, in the school health champions that we spoke to, they had someone who was the catalyst for all of this activity. And it wasn't always kind of the usual suspects that you might think of in terms of who would be the champion for school health. It was less about position, and it was more about the leadership qualities that that individual possessed. The first time we interviewed, in 2010, the most common champion we heard about was the PE teacher. But as we've done more interviews, we have found the following kinds of people kind of pop out as champions in their schools. It could be the principal, it could be a counselor, food service director. We've heard that there are nurses, parents, grade level teachers, student leadership advisors, science teachers, librarians, and gifted and talented advisors. Those are some of the different kinds of people who we've seen have those leadership qualities to emerge as a champion. The other thing that happens is that the team becomes an ever-widening circle. So what started out as a small team representing a few components becomes wider and wider over time, and all the components are represented. And it even goes beyond that. In most of the winning schools, what started out as a small group of committed individuals broadened to the point that the champion or the catalyst wasn't even required to keep it moving. So the team gains momentum and gains power and steps up and becomes the leader in the school for school health. Two other things we heard change over time with school teams, and that is both the status and the structure. Let's talk about structure first. In some cases, the school health team doesn't look years later as it did when it was first formed. And in rare cases, the school health team may actually not be in place as a team because the members go and take place on other teams that have more clout in the schools, and they take their health expertise with them. So the way the structure of the team looks over time is likely to change. The other thing that changes is the status. Sometimes a coordinated school health team or healthy schools team starts out and it is little known and may not have much clout in the school. Over time, we have talked to champions who speak of their teams becoming a gold team, which means that it now had the same status as a reading and math team. And we know in schools that that really counts. That makes a big difference. So that is a goal worth shooting for. But what really is noticeable regarding status and structure both is that the school health team and school health begins to permeate the building, and the team becomes part of the culture. One last thing about the principal, and Mary talked about the principal. Not all teams start out with a strong principal or with lots of principal support, so don't be disheartened if that's where you are. However, we did notice that the championship teams successfully found a way over time to engage their principal, and the end result being a strong, leaderful principal who really does make a difference.
All right, this is Mary again, and we're going to talk a little bit about the third characteristic of these healthy school champions, which is data. And what's really important here is that in the schools that have been awarded Healthy School Champion awards, monetary awards, almost in all cases, data drove their decision making. Data, not passion, drove their decision making. There we go. I'm caught up with you again. In schools, you know that the data exists. You have all kinds of data that you could look at, you know, from attendance data to discipline data to all of the healthy surveys that your school probably takes part in. The data are there. It's a question of using them to make decisions. And in the schools that have gotten to this championship status, they've gotten past the point where a few people are passionate about getting some things done and therefore things get started. They're now to the place where they're really making their decisions based on some data. Now, it can be a lot of different kinds of data. Here's a few data sources that are often used in award-winning schools. Other than the scorecard, which is used as a data source, you'll see the School Health Index, probably the most widely used. But the Healthy Kids Colorado survey, you'll see some climate surveys, parent surveys, all kinds of things that schools use as data sources to make decisions. But the point is that when we interviewed these top award winners, in almost every instance they said, well, we started that program because of information that we got from doing X. And in some cases it might be a school climate survey. Maybe that's a climate survey that they developed themselves, or it could be one of many that you can find online. But the point is that they used that survey to make a decision about a program that they were going to implement or something that they were going to do differently. So this next slide is a poll again, which is a survey to ask you about which of these data sources have you used or would you plan to use as you start to make some decisions about the kind of school health programs that you would implement. So click on all of these data sources that your school has used. You guys are fast. You really are staying with it. I'm proud of you. You're doing a great job. results are still coming in, so I'm going to give you about 5 more seconds to finish answering that question. And again, you can answer all of those that apply. Well, as we would have suspected, most of you use the School Health Index, but you're using other surveys as well, including school climate surveys. And I can't tell you how impressed we were with some of the climate surveys that were used. And I think that goes back to this whole thing about culture. You know, you're in schools that really have this caring, respectful attitude and that really think that health is the basis on which, you know, if kids are healthy, they're going to achieve more academic success. You can see why climate is such a big issue. So we see a lot of that going on. Not as many of you are using the Healthy Kids Colorado survey, which is the combination of the Youth Risk Behavior Survey and the assets. And it's interesting because that provides very good data as well. And you're going to see in one of the samples that we show you, one of the quotes from one of the schools in the next couple of slides, how well they use that Healthy Kids Colorado survey. So let's move out of this poll and move on to talking about this a little bit more. So here is a quote from, again, one of the people that we spoke to about how they used surveys. So I'll give you a second to read that. What we found so interesting about this is there's kind of 3 things going on here. First of all, the first data source is that the counselors administer these climate surveys twice a year. And then the second thing is based on the results, the staff focuses on key questions that need improvement on, and then they hold focus groups, which is another way of collecting data to allow student voices to be heard. So lots of data being collected here to make some decisions about the kind of programs that they want to implement. And then this next slide is another direct quote from a school health coordinator in a small district in Colorado, and I just loved this. This kind of blew us away, and this is, again, related to the Healthy Kids Colorado survey. They've used it since 2005. They look at trends, and you can see that they've seen major drops in alcohol use, drops in tobacco use, bullying has declined, absences are down, physical activity's up. She just rattled this off to us without like having any paper in front of her. And sexual intercourse has dropped 14 points. Attendance increased, bonding has increased, and GPA has increased. I mean, this was incredible about data and how they use data and how that data that they've collected has been effective in decision making and how it's been effective at them receiving grant awards, lots and lots of grant awards. And I think what's really telling, or what's important about this, is that they're not saying that their health program caused these things to happen, but just think about walking into your school board meeting and being able to say, a quote like this about how you might be able to really find some strong support for you being able to adopt some additional research-based programs. So that's a little bit more about data.
Okay, this is Donna back. So we so far have talked about 3 characteristics of the Healthy School Champions. We've talked about their culture, their effective teams, and data. So let's jump and talk about best practices. And to start, I have a survey for you to take. We want you to think about what percentage of your school health efforts represent a best practice. So please take a moment and answer this survey for us, and we'll talk about this a little bit. I'll give you a couple more minutes, seconds, not minutes. Answers are still coming in. Well, while you're looking at this, and I'm looking at it as well, If we asked 10 people to define best practices, I imagine we would get 10 different responses, and that probably doesn't surprise you. Best practices are defined differently by different people. So if you remember at the very beginning of the webinar, Mary showed you some slides. One of them was from the Colorado Legacy Foundation website, and we showed you how to access best practices on that website. It's really worth a visit. There are specific, really good information, best practices in the areas of physical activity, nutrition, health education, workplace wellness, school health services, and bullying prevention. So if you have not been to that website and you're confused about best practices, that's a really good starting point. Now,
and also, just to mention, the scorecard itself is really full of best practices. And so as you complete the scorecard, you're learning about many best practices that you could be implementing.
And as is the School Health Index. So there's lots of ways for you to get yourself familiar with best practices. Now, this poll shows that the majority of the people on this call feel that their school is using best practices, which is fantastic. And a large percentage of you, about 25%, just aren't sure. So take some time and see what you can learn about best practices from those resources. So I'm going to close the poll, and we will move on. Okay, we have observed that health-promoting schools do lots of health-related activities and programs, and some of them are best practices and some of them aren't. I would like to give you two examples of the evolution of best practices in two different schools. So let's start with School A, and let me give you the scenario. School A hired a highly qualified PE teacher who teaches the recommended number of minutes of PE. That's a best practice. This same teacher got so enthusiastic that she starts a fitness club at school. As a result, the students get excited and tell their parents. Pretty soon, the parents and the community members get involved in the fitness club. So what happens is that School A gets recognition for their fitness club, which is a direct result of having a best practice, which was that PE teacher. So let me give you another scenario that shows how another school went about getting to best practices. We'll call this School B, and their experience was a bit different. School B started with a health fair at school, which is often what happens when schools are just starting to do school health programs. And they invited parents to attend. At the health fair, the parents completed a survey, and one of the things that came out of the survey was that parents would like to use the school's fitness facilities because in this community there weren't any others available. So as a result, a fitness club is formed. All of a sudden, the support strengthens for quality PE with a recommended number of minutes, and subsequently a best practice is born. So the learning here is that there's more than one way to get to best practices. Some schools start with them, others take a more roundabout way. The bonus is that lots of valuable activities and programs can spin out of or lead into best practices. So keeping best practices as the target is very helpful. The other observation we have and we gained from the interviews is that team longevity seems to result in more best practices being implemented at the school. And this is probably a matter of the team becoming more familiar and using more research-based resources, and that's a definite plus. So keeping best practices in your sights is the way to approach school health programming. All right, we're going to move on, and we are going to talk about the fifth and final characteristic that we have identified in the Healthy School Champions, and that is partners and partnerships. It does take a village, and we use that term a lot, but when you think about partnerships, it bears a lot of truth. A sentiment that we heard often from the Healthy School Champions is The more the merrier. Bring them on. And when you think about this, it's important to remember that in the past, the majority of the winning schools who have won this award are elementary. And it does seem easier to develop partnerships at that level. Although we have heard from middle and high schools that they also have really strong partnerships. We have never heard from a school that it was difficult working with an outside partner or that it wasn't worth it. Generally what we heard was, we will take all the help we can get. And parents are certainly a big part of that equation. Parents bring their job skills with them, and in many cases those are really valuable to what the school health team can use. Parents can help with grant writing. They can help with fundraising. Parents have all kinds of helpful connections that we may not have in the school ourselves. When we did the interviews, many parents were part of the interview team, and their insight and their knowledge of the school health team was very impressive. We generally heard parents say something to the effect of, look, if the school needs it, we will find a way to get it. So building on that passion from parents is really helpful when you're thinking about partnerships. Some programs that the school will take on and some best practices are better suited to developing partnerships than others as well. So think about a community garden and think what happens in a community garden. People from all over the community gather there, they get acquainted, they learn about other people, and so building partnerships through a community garden has proven to be very successful for many schools. So think about planting the seed and growing partnerships when you think of community gardens. And the last thing we want to talk about in partnerships is how you can take advantage of some of the unique resources you have in your community. Most of you probably partner with public health. That's a great thing, and that's not a unique partnership because most schools and most counties have that. But think about this. For example, in Colorado Springs, they took advantage of the uniqueness of having the Air Force Academy close by, and they had Air Force cadets work with their after-school and their sports programs. In Gunnison, the school health team took advantage of student athletes from Western State College to work with their students. And in Metro Denver, Denver Health is planning to put a full-size clinic, that's hard to imagine, inside a Denver school. So knowing what your unique partnerships are and utilizing them is really beneficial. Let's look at the next slide because I want to ask you a question about that. Okay, this is a yes-no. I want to try something. If you say yes, take a second and write in the chat box, just write 2 or 3 words about what that unique partnership is. It would be interesting for us to see those, and we'll read those to everyone when they come in. So go ahead and answer that if you would. Right now, our results show that 80% of you, 83%, are partnering with some organization that is unique to your community. So one school district is partnering with a local aid service organization. Go ahead and write in that chat box if you want to share your unique partnership. Another one is partnering with CSU Extension Office. That's a great idea. Those are in many counties. Another one is taking a field trip to Whole Foods. If you're lucky enough to have a Whole Foods in your community, that's a fabulous partnership. I'll wait just a few more seconds and see if anyone else types in their unique partnerships. Someone is partnering with Bronco players, both present and past. And in Colorado Springs and Fort Carson, they're partnering with LiveWell. And Fort Carson. Excellent. Okay, thank you for answering those questions. That's helpful to help you think about what else some other partnerships might be. Now, before we move on, we haven't talked much about district coordinators and their value and their contributions. And I don't want to end this webinar without talking about how valuable they are. Remember that regarding the scorecard and the Healthy School Champion Awards, it's schools and not districts that apply for those, and so we haven't had much opportunity to really talk about the value of the district coordinator. But the Healthy School Champions, in their interviews, always reference their district coordinator as resources, as connectors to district administrators, as connectors to the community, and as primary supporters and advocates for school health. In many cases, the district coordinator got them started, might have been responsible for writing the grant that brought school health to the district and to the schools, and they even might help them complete the scorecard. So if you're fortunate enough to be in a school district or a school where you have a district level coordinator, be sure to tap their expertise whenever you can. Okay, and in summary, we want you to think about some future considerations if you are thinking that you want to be a champion. The first one is get your principal involved, and get them involved in meaningful ways. And know that this will look different from school to school, but getting your principal in a leadership position will pay off down the road. Remember to use data to drive decisions. It's better for your school if data, and not just the passion of an individual or a few individuals, is what drives decisions, and also drives decision-making about school health. Third, do everything you can to create that long-lasting, health-promoting school culture. It is really the key to sustainability, and we heard that over and over again from the Healthy School Champions. Implement more best practices. You can't go wrong by doing that, and know that it might take a while to get there, but that should be your target. And again, look for partners that are unique to your community, because they will make a difference in a way that will really help your school. So, if you have questions for us to answer, type them into the chat box, and while you're doing that, I'm going to turn this over to Katie Fleming, and she's going to talk to you, give you a bit more information about some more details and deadlines and dates regarding both the scorecard and the event.
Thank you, Don and Mary. That was just fabulous. A couple of important dates is January 10th is the first important date, and that's your application deadline. And had a few, different questions from people about does the entire application need to be in? And yes, that includes both the quantitative and the qualitative part of the application, which is doing the scorecard itself, as well as uploading your success stories and your letters of support. And then the awards will be announced in February. And again, if you're not the school champion, make sure that you let somebody else know, so that they can kind of keep those deadlines in mind. And then finally, the last one is on April 17th. If you could mark your calendars, that will be the Legacy Healthy Schools and Integration Summit. And at that summit, there will be a Healthy Schools Champions Recognition Breakfast, and that's where we recognize the award winners for the Healthy School Champions. Last year we had 32 award winners, and this year we're probably shooting for somewhere around that amount, but adding some seed money awards as well. And then also on that day, there's the 2013 Legacy Luncheon. And throughout the day, there's plenty of speakers, workshops going on that we'd love for you to be able to attend the entire day on that. And we've got, whoops, I'll get that for you. Sorry about that. Technology. It's a little tough for you to see that, but a couple of great speakers at the summit. Zeke Emanuel is going to be the keynote for the Legacy Luncheon. He's an American bioethicist and proponent of voucher-based universal health care, so he's going to be very interesting. And then the keynote for the breakfast is going to be Roland Fryer, who is an economist from Harvard and also a 2011 MacArthur Fellow. So we really hope that you can join us for the summit.
Okay, we would love to hear your questions either about the Healthy School Champions and their characteristics, or if you have questions about dates, deadlines, and details, we'd be glad to answer those as well. So if you do, take a moment and type into the chat box, and we will wait for a second and see if any questions pop up.
Donna, do you mind if I add something about the best practices that might be a helpful guide?
That's fine. That's a great idea.
Just another thought as you're, looking both at the resources, the great resources that Donna and Mary talked about. Also, when you're looking at, there's a rubric available on the Healthy School Champions website that is going to help you write your success story for the qualitative part of the scorecard. And that rubric is really based on best practices. So if you take a look at that rubric, it's going to include many of the key points that Donna and Mary included today. So that'll help you guide, your questions and your answers to what your school is doing, and are you doing it in a way that uses best practices.
Thanks, Katie. Well, we had one question come up, and the question is, do you have suggestions for ways to get a principal engaged or on board? So I'll take a stab at that, and then Mary or Katie can join in if they want. Sometimes we've seen that principals are actually the driving force, and they're the ones that initiate the team, initiate the school health activities, and that's probably the best of every world, because then the support comes from the top, and it's easy, and that's wonderful. Unfortunately, that's not always the case. So in other cases, we've seen a school health team be formed, and the team is active and successful and implements a few programs and activities, and what happens is that it gets the attention of not just other people in the school, but it gets the principal's attention, and principals then want to be more involved with it. So there's different ways to do this. I think starting some activities, having your principal be involved with them is helpful. Giving your principal some talking points so that the principal can talk about school health in a way that is he or she doesn't have to try and figure that out on their own is very helpful. Principals either like or dislike being invited to the school health team meetings depending on what the day looks like, but if your principal is not able to come, some teams have had a team member kind of be assigned to the one who meets with the principal afterwards and lets them know what the team's up to, what kind of help they need, and that kind of thing. So I think you're going to have to find your own strategy for what works with your principal and their level of interest and their level of knowledge about school health. But I think the key thing is do something, try something, and keep your principal in the loop in any way that you can manage to do that. We had another slide that says, will you have the PowerPoint slides available after the webinar? Yes, they're going to be archived on the Colorado Legacy Foundation website.
It's actually on the healthyschoolchampions.org. So healthyschoolchampions.org.
We're typing that in right now so you can see it.
And I'm going to put that, I'm going to actually send that to everybody. It was from a question, but I'll broadcast it to all. And I'm sorry that hold on a second, that should be .org. I think I put a 0 there instead of a O, so healthyschoolchampions.org.
Okay, any other questions? We're showing the slide right now that has Katie Fleming's contact information, and you can reach her by email, which is probably the best way to reach Katie. She doesn't work every single day, but she works a lot. Or you can leave her a message at that phone number. And I think, in the absence of other questions, we will say thank you so much for your time this afternoon. Go get them, go be a champion, and good luck, and complete the scorecard, and we hope that you're one of the people we're interviewing in a few months.
Yeah. Thanks very much. Have a great day.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you. Bye-bye.